They really don't waste any time, do they? They banned this thing what feels like 2 seconds ago, and it's already had its tiering status updated on the site. For those of you who are watching the screen, then no, you are not being deceived in any way. Feel free to go to smogan.com slash bw slash Pokemon slash Cloyster and see for yourself that it is in fact Uber. And for those of you who are listening to me in your car or wherever, then yeah, that's what's on the screen right now. And now what we are going to put on the screen is a replay from this past season of the Smogan Premier League, because we must ask ourselves that immortal question of how did we get here? Well, the basic gist is that in Generation 5, first and foremost, you must cover rain threats, because otherwise you will get swept. Unchecked rain is just, you will get obliterated by it. And the best way to take on rain is to take away the rain. And the most consistent way to do that by far is to run sand. Also, because Tyranitar handles some other broken threats that are not rain Pokemon. Well, Latios can be a rain Pokemon, isn't necessarily. But it also takes on the broken Latios, as well as the contentious Alakazam, and the also broken Reuniclus. So, Sand has been a pillar of the metagame for a long time. It is the playstyle that brought consistency to the tier. Because so many other aspects of Gen 5, how do you possibly make a consistent team? Sand was that consistent team. So many variations of Sand, of course. But Sand overall, running T-Tar, is what allowed you to have some semblance of consistency. And whenever, for periods of time where Gen 5 hit a balanced state, it was because Sand was really holding it together. So, a lot of the decisions, or a lot of the contentious points of the past more than half decade at this point, closer to a decade than a half decade, have been targeting elements of the game that have disrupted this balanced state. And people go, oh, you just want Sand balance to be super safe to use. It's not super safe to use unless your opponent has a bad team. Whatever these issues were, Arena Trap, Dugtrio, Sandrush, Excadrill, and now Cloyster, they were overbearing in their ability to punish Sand. And that is the crux of Cloyster as opposed to, say, Mamoswine. Because the way that these Sand teams are built, it is not just T-Tar plus any 5. It is T-Tar plus other Pokemon you use to actually take these threats on. And in the case of something like using Lando T as a physical wall, you are not hard countering teams running both SD Garchomp or Terrakion plus DD Dragonite. You are playing around them. That's why Sand teams were generally dominant without being broken. I mean, they sometimes use broken elements themselves. See the aforementioned Alakazam, Reuniclus, Latios trio that often gets used. But for a long time, it was allowing you to play around things. It wasn't handing you free wins. So they were very, very possible to punish, too. So many variants of great Pokemon like Keldeo, Thundurus T, Latios, Hydreigon, Heatran, Garchomp, Lando T, all very, very possible to mess up Sand. And the way that Sand wound up... Toxic or Breloom was one for a while. And the way Sand was built, the way it was optimized in order to take on the greater metagame at large, the more it was revealed that it kind of was forced into certain patterns in order to be optimal in taking this metagame on. And this kind of is the underlying issue of the tier. When you were relying on Sand solely to keep everything busted in check, and then Sand is forced into a certain shape, then that shape becomes exploitable. And this was an ice resist shape. That was badly phrased. You get what I mean. They lacked good ice resists. And not to say that there weren't some teams with ice resist. Rotom Wash, sometimes a Slow Twin. but nothing really that was going to take on Mamoswine. So Mamoswine really became popular for its ability, checks offensive threats, but now that's almost secondary to its near peerless ability to rip through sand teams. Now, Mamoswine will punish a sand team very, very well, but it is not an automatic win. And here is where the parallel to Cloyster comes in. And this is why it was contentious. Nobody is clamoring to ban Mamoswine. As great a Pokemon as it is, and it really is a phenomenal Pokemon, it is not the kind of Pokemon that auto wins games unless the opponent is giving it to you. Because a good team will have tools against Mamoswine, or tools that give the player the option to outplay it. With Cloyster, it is much more restrictive because a free turn for Mamoswine can mean a KO. A free turn for Cloyster can mean the entire game is won off of one turn against a healthy, well-built team. And that's the issue. Part one of the issue is that it's too strong a punish for sand teams. The reward for getting a Shell Smash off is too great. It's similar to its friend Volcarona, to whom we will get in a second. And the second issue is that, yes, it has checks, but those checks are very few, number one, and that list of checks has shrunk in recent times for developments we will cover. And additionally, Cloyster has the problem where it punishes. It's not like it's one of those Pokemon like Volcarona, which, all things considered, is not the toughest thing in the world to stop from setting up. Cloyster happens to have, flawed defensively though it may be, it will get Shell Smashes reliably. It's not like a baton pass situation where it feels like a near coin flip. No, it is consistently able to punish these Pokemon that are so important to the tier. The Lando Ts and Gliscors, let's say. And this bulky ground position is incredibly important. That's why Sand was so consistent, because you could take on much of the metagame. And here comes Cloyster, the outlier. Now again, Mamoswine will punish those two as hard as anything, but Mamoswine isn't instantly winning the game. So Cloyster, that's the basic idea, that it's that is being argued, that has been argued, I should say, at this point, that it punishes these staples that you need to cover the metagame at large way too hard. Because what are you going to do? Not run these excellent Pokemon? You can, but congratulations on opening yourself up to Pokemon that are used much more consistently. Now, I picked this replay not just because the Hyper Offense team used by Sensei Axew here is symbolic of the highly aggressive Cloyster Hyper Offense playstyle that has popped up over the past, again, more than half decade at this point. But also because it showcases a development in checking Cloyster that really speaks to how restrictive it is in the team builder. And it's the thing that makes it so frustrating is that it's not just, pack a check to it. It's pack an incredibly specific check to it because of just how powerful it is after a single turn of boosting. And when you are so consistently getting this boost, then black and white team building is limited as is, and Cloyster just restricts this to an unreasonable degree. So what happens here? Abomasnow does stuff. Okay, so Lando T comes in. Lando T has to be used. Cloyster, it's spoiler alert for those watching. Cloyster does not actually sweep here because it is checked by this Ferrothorn. But it's not just any old Ferrothorn. It is a citrus berry Ferrothorn. And if you're thinking that sounds completely awful, it is. It is absolutely appalling. It is literally only used for Cloyster. The fact that citrus berry Ferrothorn and citrus berry Reuniclus are being used for Cloyster in serious high-level matches speaks to how unbelievably sparse the pool of Cloyster checks is. This is an item that is so much worse than anything else you'd want to run. Every single time you don't face a cloister, yet only for cloister, and it's just because it's not even just for the health. By virtue of attacking 5 times, cloister does often. I mean, it's cheesy by nature because of its uninteractive click the boost move and go for the sweep playstyle that it has been engaging in ever since it was first unleashed on the world when running King's Rock for high flinch rates. But also by virtue of the fact that with 5 hits, you have a very decent crit rate. So oftentimes you will muscle through your checks without trying. You'll just go, well, I hope I crit, but those are pretty good odds, all things considered. So, yeah, you get that whole problem where it's not even like, oh, just stay out of KO range, and if you get crit, unlucky. It's not even that unlucky. It's... God, would you shut that? Okay, that's not important, but I'm going to turn the buzzing of the texting off. Yeah, the Cloy problem is that you don't just have to stay healthy, by the way. By virtue of how insanely hard it's hitting, it's going to be... You have to stay in utterly pristine shape. And even then, that crit is... 1 in 5 is probably going to ruin you. In the replay on the screen, then Cloyster crit 1 of the 5... icicle spears, and Ferrothorn was still left at pretty much... It was still pretty much KO'd. So even if Cloyster itself doesn't sweep, then a teammate very likely will be able to pick up the pieces, or it becomes a lot easier for it. Yeah, so that's one thing. And it's not just about how strong it is, but about how fast it is. So the basic premise is that it is too... With how fast it is, with how strong it is, with the other aspect, like Icicle Spear getting so many crit chances, and it rips through Focus Sash, so you can't check it with Magic Guard Zam because of the multi-hit nature of the move. It's just overbearing. So, Cloyster was voted on initially a few months ago, alongside its fellow cheese friend Volcarona. So, this is contentious because whenever 2 Pokemon are voted on simultaneously, then they feel it's harder to get a really representative vote in, because like this happened in the current generation when it was time to vote on Keldeo and Tornadus Therian in the same suspect. But in this case, some people thought, well, I don't want to risk banning both. I think only one of them should be banned, and that kind of dilutes the effect. And it wound up that neither Volcarona nor Cloyster were banned. So Volcarona received actually both of them received a 50% ban rate, so not sufficient for 60%. Out of 30, it was 15-15 on both. So yeah, that happened back in January before SPL, and now SPL Cloyster has been voted on again, and yeah, we skipped to the end. And we had 67.7% bans. After 34 votes, it became impossible for it to not be banned. So yeah, out of those 34, we had 23 banned, 11 do not ban, for a 67.7% ban rate. And that is why Cloyster is in Ubers now. Cloyster is just as Uber as Genesect and Ho-Oh and Kyogre and all those big guns. It's funny because Cloyster actually does have a niche in Gen 5 Ubers, but that's not what we're here to discuss, as interesting though it is. So what changed in these couple months? Well, first of all, the fact was that after the initial Volcarona Cloyster test, it was always generally planned to revisit Cloyster in case it, just to give it another shot. When something is contentious, you don't want to just, try it once and then throw it away forever. And in fact, Cloyster, and there were some people, actually mostly ABR, saying, hey, don't ban this thing because we've already suspected it a million times. But there was always something else. It was, whether it was gems, that was when it first really came to people's attention. People said, okay, well, when it's not running Icicle Spear with Ice Gem, which boosts every hit, or sometimes even Rock Gem boosted Rock Blast to cut through things like Rotom Wash, then in those cases, Without that, then it's a lot more easier to deal with. But, by virtue of everything we know, that crit rate, the fact that it still hits really hard, it's really, really not that much more palatable. So, what has changed? Well, the fact that some people think Cloyster has already been an issue in and of itself, and it was being revisited without Volcarona to distract from the vote. You don't have the issue of, oh, well, I don't want both banned, I just want Cloysters, but I don't want to risk it, so it can affect voters' decisions. And with Cloy only on the table, then there's that. However, in SPL, people said, oh, well, we'll see how SPL goes, and then we will revisit it. But in SPL, it wasn't really that much of an issue. People weren't trying it as much. Maybe they were dissuaded because it wasn't banned. It's like, see, it's not that bad. I don't know. Sometimes players just sleep on things for a little bit. I guess it makes more sense that the more charitable and probably accurate interpretation is that Cloyster, with so many eyes on the Volcarona and Cloyster suspect, it was going to be tougher to pull it off because people would come packing checks. They would be very prepared. You weren't going to catch anyone off guard with it. So, maybe let it rest for a while and then whip it out when it's not expected. That's when cheese is scariest. If your opponent comes lactose intolerant, as we sometimes call it, then you are not going to be able to sneak those dairy products by them. But, yeah, you've got that. But there's also the fact that in SPL, there was a new variant of Cloyster popping up. And for those looking at the screen, I have highlighted this Peng post, which I will link in the pinned comments, along with everything else in the video. But, yeah, Cloyster was used straight cheese. I won't quote the whole thing, but cheese, blah, blah, blah. Mixed set. That is the big thing here. That has really pushed it over the edge because I noticed several voters who previously were like, Cloyster's not that bad. Yes, it's stupid, but there are bigger issues. I personally would get rid of the stupid thing, even if there are bigger issues, because less threats to deal with is a good thing. And if this thing is really that stupid, and it is, then good riddance. We are better off for not having it. But, yeah. So the mix set is what makes people scared, because over time, people were adapting to Cloyster when it was running that full physical Smash, Icicle Spear, Rock Blast, Ice Shard set. And so then there were some hyper offense teams using Rapid Spin on it to give Volk and D-Knight some more support. But generally that, right? Because Ice Shard means you can't outspeed it with Scarf Latios and all that. But this physical set, it can be checked by things. Slowbro, Fortress, Magnezone, Reuniclus, Keldeo, to name the ones that are actually good and named in Peng's post. And Keldeo is obviously the best one. Keep your Keldeo healthy, you're fine. And Heatran is one that's not mentioned here. But yeah, keep Heatran healthy and you're okay. Funny that you actually use Heatran to check a boosting water type, but hey, Pokemon. Yeah, so Slowbro is a good Pokemon. Fortress, more specific, but okay. Magnezone, okay, good Pokemon. Reuniclus, yeah. Putting aside the absurd fact that it was using Citrus Berry. Oh my god. But then it was revealed that some people thought, hey, remember the fact that Cloyster actually has a very, very serviceable 85 special attack stat, and Shell Smash is also doubling it, and when you give it a Life Orb, it is hitting insanely hard on both sides of the attacking spectrum. You maintain Icicle Spear, of course. You got a Breakthrough Zam Sash, and you love that sweet, sweet crit rate. But you also, this way, boost your special attacks a significant amount. And suddenly, with Hydro Pump and HP Grass, goodbye Heatran, goodbye Fortress, goodbye Magnezone, and with HP Grass, goodbye Slowbro. Oh, Rotom Wash, another check that's not mentioned here. Goodbye Slowbro, goodbye Rotom Wash, goodbye Keldeo. It's just, you don't even have to run Life Orb. Some people run Expert Belt just so it doesn't get affected by extra recoil and it's harder to play around. You like the power. And you know how we were talking about absurd techs used to keep it in check before? Citrus Pharaoh, Citrus Reuniclus. Yeah, you know what people are using now? Earth Power Landorus Therian. So much worse against literally everything else. But you know that whole thing about, oh, well, it sets up on Lando T? Well, not anymore. Oh, what's the payoff, or what's the trade-off? Oh, only the fact that you have a much, much, much worse Landorus Therian. With a stab ground move that, 5-hit KOs T-Tar or something. That's, I'm sure it doesn't 5-hit KO T-Tar, but you're not threatening. You're not threatening, and the whole thing with Lando T is that it's supposed to be threatening. So, yeah, that is basically what pushed it over the edge. The fact that it was running a mixed set. It was. I mean, it's. Yeah. Some people took issue with the idea of Lando T being quote-unquote safe. Why should it be safe? Well, and again, to that I would highlight the difference between Cloyster and Mammothswine. Rock's Lando T is safe. First of all, being safe is good because it provides stability against an onslaught of terrifying threats. But I would also say that it is a disproportionate punish for a safe Pokemon. Safe Pokemon will always be punished somehow. No matter how safe you think your advanced Scarm Bliss is, for example, there are a million ways to really make the opponent pay for it. But you have to really work for it. That's the thing with Mammothswine. You will punish Gliscor and Lando T and Sand teams in general really hard, but you are not winning the game on the spot. I mean, if you do, then your opponent has just given it to you. And that's as much the opponent's failure as it is your success. Because Mammothswine shouldn't be auto-winning the game on the spot against any one competent with a competent team. But with Cloyster, as we have now demonstrated, the pool of viable checks is so small. And even these viable checks are so vulnerable to getting overwhelmed by a shift in moveset or just sheer luck that isn't even really that unlucky by virtue of that crit rate. So, on Icicle Spear anyway, but Mixed Sense have Rock Blast too, so it's especially nasty. Yeah, that's basically it. It punishes. It does what it does too well. It is too effective a punish. It throws the metagame out of whack by virtue of turning reliable pillars of the tier that provide stability into risks for losing the entire game on the spot. No matter how scary a sweeper, if it is able to take otherwise well-built teams and just threaten to clean them up off of one turn against healthy. It's not like it's picking off 6 Pokemon that are all hanging at half. It's picking off healthy teams, healthy, well-built teams off one turn of setup. It's too much. And that is why it has... And between, being able to now resoundingly ruin its checks, with that in mind, then it is absolutely just... it's too much. And that is why it has so resoundingly received the ban hammer. Now, I suppose, since it has been voted on multiple times, I don't think it will be revisited anytime soon. I can't imagine people want to, given the Herculean effort to get this thing dealt with to begin with. I mean, there were people who didn't even want to get rid of it, or didn't want to limit it in any way, even when gems were around. But yeah, Hyper Offense has been dealt a major blow, and some people also would say, oh, well, Hyper Offense is less viable now, and it doesn't have as good a way of punishing sand teams. I mean, there are plenty of ways to punish sand teams that don't involve broken Pokemon, and you don't keep a broken thing around just because it exists in the metagame. Well, I mean, I at least kind of get the whole, well, it checks this other broken thing, and then we would have to ban that. While I personally see no issue with banning multiple broken things, I understand the hesitation by virtue of how difficult it is to get anything done. So rather grin and bear it than potentially have to go through the issue of trying to get people on board with banning this other broken thing. Because as tiering history has showed us, it doesn't matter how broken the Pokemon is, there will be people who want to keep it around. I mean, with all due respect, and Soulwind is due all the respect in the world, when this most recent slate of Gen 5 OU tiering discussion kicked off, he referred to Cloyster as a meme. So, yeah. Anyway, I mean, Soulwind is perfectly well within his rights to call the entire community a bunch of morons who doesn't know what they're doing and ruining the tier or whatever. But, yeah, I have to personally side with the Cloyster is busted opinion here. But yeah, it's not even about that, oh, this thing is broken, but I've also seen similar arguments along the lines of, oh, Thunder's Therian being banned would make rain worse. It's like, and? Does rain, or in this case, with the case of Cloyster, does Cloyster being hyper offensive, or does Cloyster being good on hyper offense mean that hyper offense is entitled to this level of viability? You know, I think that's a very nonsensical argument. You know, if you think hyper offense is a good place in the metagame, that it does something important, okay, but I don't think that's the argument most people are making. So, with the victory theme playing, we will end this video there, as I think it is a fitting note that we have finally banned this obnoxious piece of cheese from the tier. So that is basically why it has happened. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one.